Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Geekfest Rants. Today, we are continuing our 2010 fall preview recap series. Today's show features Thursday shows, all the new and old shows that we are currently watching on Thursdays. With me, once again, is Steve Avona. Say hi, Steve.
Hi, Carlos.
Let's begin off the bat with The Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
Steve, I believe you are familiar with the show.
Very familiar, yes.
Please begin.
I think The Big Bang Theory is the best three-camera sitcom out there today, and it has so much for geeks in terms of, I guess the best word is in-jokes. You have Jim Parsons, who steals the show every week as
is he Sheldon?
He's Sheldon, and what can you say about him? He's brilliant. The character he plays is such a social misfit, yet he is so blissfully unaware that he just doesn't care of how he's perceived by everybody else, and he's brilliant, but completely socially inept.
It's great because he makes us feel so much better for ourselves.
Very much so. I mean, you have a character like Leonard, who I think we might relate to just a little bit more in terms of our how we interact with the real world and the people in the real world, so to speak. But Sheldon is just completely out there, and he's done so much with that character, and the character is always referencing science fiction, comic books, what have you, and so very rarely does a joke get past me that is related to one of those aspects. You know, occasionally the show is guilty of going for a cheap laugh now and then, but more often than not, it's just brilliantly written, and the interaction is great. I even think, the Penny Leonard romance dynamic has been handled well in terms of keeping that going. I'm sure they want the show to go for a long time, possibly, 7 years is usually the standard. And
they probably try to on purpose to avoid them being on a relationship, because that's usually the kiss of death for most shows.
So they got to it quickly, and then they ended it, and you get the sense that it's not over forever. But what's most interesting now is Sheldon's quotes, if that's what you want to call it. The last episode, which I watched last night, I thought was absolutely hysterical in terms of how he relates to a woman and who's just like him. And when they sort of break up, how he deals with that.
The girlfriend who's a girl who happens to be a friend.
Yes, and he denies that there's any romantic attachment and doesn't want to get physical and all this other kind of stuff. But when it ends, he's distraught, and he fills his room with a bunch of cats, and I just thought it was hysterical. So, and as I said, you have guest stars like Stan Lee and Will Wheaton and Katie Sackhoff, who just appealed to the geek in me, and a lot of them are going to return this season.
Even the secondary characters, their friends, they're also hilarious.
Definitely. Each character has their own thing, and each character has their own flaw. There's their own social flaw, which you find endearing. Raj can't talk to women
unless he's drunk.
And Wolowitz, he's
his mom.
He's got his mother, and he's got his issues with women and how he relates to women, and just the way they interact. Again, it does tend to make you feel better about yourself. I think the one character that we can all relate to, though, is Leonard.
Yeah, and the thing is that they give you extremes. They give you from one range to the other. Raj completely unable to communicate with women. But his friend is way overconfident and completely steps over the line with what he says, because he cannot gauge
he has
social norms.
Yes, no monologue either. He just says it.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I love this show. It's I think, are they on their third season now? I think this might be the third season.
I want to say it's their fourth.
Wow.
I'm not.
But yeah, it's funny because if you were to take all the geeky stuff out of the show, I think it would still be a pretty funny show. But the interesting thing about it is that they purposely write in all the geek jokes that it's hard to believe that people get them. In other words, a lot of times I think they're making a crack about something, and it's like, oh, just the geeks are getting this joke. But I
Right.
guess based on the ratings, a lot of people are getting the joke.
Yes, definitely.
Let's move on. While we're on the CBS train here, let's go to the next CBS show, which is, I guess the what they call it is Bleep. My dad says, is that the
Yes.
acceptable name for the show?
That is the acceptable title that's screwing up all the DVRs.
Oh my God! So far it's been recording, but I kept thinking when they first announced they were going. First of all, the thing about this show is that when they first announced they were going to do this show, I was a little like, what? Because it's a show based on basically a Twitter feed,
Right.
and it's like, how do you turn a bunch of phrases into an actual show? And I mean, they did, and it's still kind of like, okay, they're kind of getting their footing down in terms of, I watched the first one, and it was weird because based on the advanced reviews that I've heard, I was hearing the show is a mess in terms of not funny. They were calling it's the next caveman show, basically. It's a failed concept show. But off the bat, for the first episode, I was pretty surprised at how funny it was. It's not. It was, to me. It wasn't hilarious, but it was. Maybe it's because I lowered the bar so much when based on the information beforehand that
Right.
I was pleasantly surprised by it. So I'm trying to I'm going to keep up with it, see where it goes. Obviously, Shatner is the big draw of the show. He commands the show. The supporting characters, which he's kind of like more or less the second guy in the show, because his son is really the guy who leads the show. He is the secondary person, but he's definitely the star. He shines. The other people are kind of like it almost feels like they're catching up to speed because it's a brand new show. The other thing about it is that his lines are. It's hard to kind of tell what's original from the concept of the show and what's the show itself. In other words, while I'm watching it, I'm trying to say, okay, that must have been from the Twitter feed. That must have been one of those famous things that guy had said that inspired the show. So it's a little difficult trying to pinpoint where things are coming from.
Yeah.
But even Shatner, I would say, he needs to get a little more comfortable with the part. At times, it almost feels like he's just delivering these lines that are custom made for him, and they come out pretty good coming from him because of this mystique that he's built, for all these years. But it needs to gel a little more, and hopefully they'll give it a little more time.
Well, I watched the first 2 episodes, and I'm not as forgiving towards it as you are. I agree that it's hard to build a show around a concept, and while I'm sure I'm not very familiar with the Twitter feed itself, but I mean, to become as popular as it has been, I'm sure it's hilarious. But then the problem comes when you try to build a story around, and while Shatner is one of the demigods for us geeks, so I usually am drawn to anything he does. And I watched Boston Legal for 5 years, and I thought it was hilarious. But a lot of problems I see with this show. First of all, I don't think he's comfortable in the sitcom format. It's not something one of the few things he's never done before. I find the actors supporting him not funny. I find the lead actor, his son, not funny. Shatner's delivery, I think, is spot on. More often than not, what he says is funny.
Has the lead been on something else? He looked completely fresh to me.
I'm sure he has. Honestly, I've never seen him before. Okay. He doesn't even look familiar to me. But interaction with the kid and his interaction with everybody, he's almost in a slight way playing a similar version to the character he played on Boston Legal. But it worked there. The writing was so much crisper and sharper. He had a great dynamic with James Spader. And here, I honestly think he's wasted. I don't think the show's going to last. Again, but I wouldn't think it would last. But I think the ratings have been very good for it. So I think it's going to. And the reviews were terrible, but it seems to be.
I'm sure it helps to follow Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's got a great lead in. But it's not coming together for me. The worst kind of sitcom is a sitcom where you see the joke coming a mile away. And in this case, that happens. It honestly comes like Big Bang Theory. You can say you telegraph the joke a mile away, and you hear it, and you know it's that's cute, you know. But that's almost the inherent problem with the sitcom format. Certain shows handle it better, other shows don't, and I don't think this one's going to have the legs. And my wife hates it, and I don't think I'm going to stick with it, despite the fact that the Shat is in it. I can't honestly. That would be the only thing keeping me connected to it. If it was anybody else but him, I would have been done after the first episode.
It's funny because whatever exposure that we've seen of him in comedy has been either commercials that he does, funny little skits, or specifically stuff made for TV shows like MTV, where when he's singing on some of the MTV awards, stuff like that.
Talk singing.
But as far as an actual comedy setting, I think the only thing I can think of is Free Enterprise.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's had roles in, I think it was Loaded Weapon and Airplane 2.
That's
I
right.
think it was. You know, he's done some cameos
granted,
here and there.
Back then in Airplane 2, he wasn't the Shat. He was still he was William Shatner, trying to do comedy. Something happened, maybe I would say maybe like 15, 20 years ago, where he started to change and capitalize from his persona.
And I think it might have even been with that movie, because you see what the Airplane films did for certain actors, like Leslie Nielsen, who was a dramatic actor, and all of a sudden found out that he had this, great sense of humor and started this whole new career for him. Shatner is the kind of person who's savvy enough to reinvent himself every few years to laugh at himself and longevity that he's had.
I know. Let's jump over to NBC and the 8 o'clock show, which now I'm not sure if this used to be at 9 o'clock and they switched it. Community.
I think it was their 8 o'clock show last season.
Okay, do you watch that?
Yes, I do. That's one of the best ensemble comedies on television. And it resurrected Chevy Chase. It's I just find it absolutely hilarious.
It's his Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, it is his Pulp Fiction, and I think that it's just a masterpiece of casting, that show. And I think it gets better and better. I think it started out a little shaky last year, but it's definitely found its legs. And I love every character in the show, and I love how the character everything to TV and films. And I'm just waiting, if the show lasts long enough, I'm waiting for him to realize he's on a television show and break the sort of the fourth wall and start talking to the audience. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just kind of see that's where he might be going. But I think it's a hilarious ensemble, and it's a great lead-in for the rest of the comedy block.
I definitely gave this show a shot when it first came out, and immediately certain characters jumped out. Obviously the Chevy Chase character, it's a good fit for him because he's been kind of very unpopular for the last number of years in terms of doing lousy films, and he never fits. He always seems to be stuck on this. It's kind of like he knows the joke. He knows there's a joke being told, but nobody's laughing kind of mode.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's part of his persona. But in this show, it fits. He's there. He knows that people don't like him too much, but he doesn't care. He keeps going with it, and it works. It actually, the stuff they write for him actually works pretty well.
It plays the writers play to his strengths, definitely.
Right. The other character that sticks out to me now, obviously the lead character. Was Jeff? Is it Jeff?
Yeah, Joel McHale.
Joel McHale, who is the lead. It's funny because even though he's the lead, it's like you said, it's an ensemble group, and he doesn't kind of hog the scene.
No.
I like the I think he's the Indian character who's Abed, who's again he's the huge nerd geek,
right?
Which is always sprouting out all these movie lines and he's always like TV. Thinking in a film way. He's always staging things in his mind. And again, more of him, yes, definitely. Give me more. It's almost like a character that belongs in Big Bang Theory. How he kind of fits in the whole thing. But yeah, I'll definitely stick with Community. It's a pretty good show. Now from Community we go to 30 Rock, which now again it's one of these shows that It feels like it's been on for 2 years, but it's really been on for like 3 or 4.
Oh, I think it's the fifth
Oh
season.
my
This
God.
is the fifth
Yeah.
season. Yeah.
Great, very funny. You have all these you have Tina Fey, ex SNL person, and
Tracy
Tracy Morgan,
Morgan.
another ex SNL. Very funny. And for me, it's weird watching the show because I work in that setting, and it's all there. It's all happening right in front of you, like all these settings. Um, uh, Very good with the Emmys. They reward that show a lot, and it definitely keeps me interested. How do you feel?
It's my favorite single camera comedy. The writing is hilarious. Tina Fey is a brilliant writer. It's funny when we saw Late Night with her and Steve Carell, we hated it. And I said my wife was like, well, why was this so not funny? And my response was, well, Tina Fey didn't write it. And that's the problem. I think she's a brilliant writer. And I love how they seem to be allowed to take shots at NBC.
Oh
the
my
last
God.
episode made fun of the cancellation of Law and Order several times. They referenced the whole Leno debacle
Yep.
and the Conan debacle last season, which the way they did it was creative and it was hilarious.
And they do it even if there's like internal political things happening.
Yeah.
Managerial, structural things, the company
Right.
being bought off by another company, they talk about
Yeah.
that, and they're allowed to get away with it, and it's hilarious.
I'm glad NBC lets it happen. She has a great dynamic with Alec Baldwin, and even though he's not a former SNL cast member, he's hosted the show enough times, I think,
Might
to
as
be
well be.
considered.
Might as well be.
And his comedic timing is incredible, and his dynamic with Tina Fey is hilarious. And you have Tracy Morgan, who's just completely off the wall and
Right.
and funny, and the rest of the cast. But I love Tina Fey. I love how her character always messes up a good thing and how self-destructive she is. I've actually known women like that in my own life, and I just think it's funny to see. Again, like everything else, it's exaggerated, but I think it's probably the best comedy on television today.
There's also a very clear geek streak running through that show. She has a lot of references to Star Wars and all kinds of geeky material. But going back to the writing of the show, they're very smart jokes. It's the type of joke. It's almost like a little time bomb. They tell the joke, and then it's like when it starts to sink in, and you're like, oh, that's what they meant, and it kind of keeps going after it's told.
Yes. I mean, you do have to have certain. It's definitely not lowbrow humor. It's very it's very intellectual humor.
But it's crude. It's very crude. It's hiddenly crude.
Yes, and but it doesn't hurt to be up on current events and politics and that kind of stuff to know what's going on. But yet, you have an episode like the one that just aired, and you have a guest. You have Rob Reiner there, and Alec Baldwin calls him Meathead, and there's just that whole, if you love TV, you got the joke immediately, and
Brian Williams keeps showing up and making a fool of himself and loving it.
Right, and I just love the fact that so many people are willing to make fun of themselves. The fact that she uses classic actors, classic television actors, brings them in. Buck Henry, actors and writers. You had Buck Henry. You have Elaine Stritch as Alec Baldwin's mother, and she brings in great guests when she has the chance.
Cool. All right, let's move on to The Office. I assume that's another one of yours?
Yeah, The Office, I think, it's in its seventh season, and it's slipped somewhat, but it still maintains a pretty high bar. It's still funny. I think that the more they go to the supporting cast, which I don't think is enough, the funnier it can be. Again, I'll point to the last episode with Andy doing Sweeney Todd and all of them coming to see him. And I just love the fact, you see this more often, that they shoot a lot more with the socially aired, because if you ever look at the deleted scenes on the DVDs or what they show online, they do so much more with them that doesn't make it. And I think they're hilarious. And I realize in 22 minutes you don't have a lot of time to get to everybody, but I just think it's got the best supporting cast on television, and I wonder how much they're going to be relied on when Steve Carell leaves the show, and very, very curious to see who they get to replace him. because I assume that the show they want the show to go on.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one because you definitely need to put a name in there. You
Yeah.
can't just have somebody who's not very well known. It's got to be a heavy hitter, comedic heavy hitter, and
Yeah.
I would hate to to be the person to select it because it's going to
Yeah.
sink the show or save the show, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah. And um, I've heard rumors that they could bring in Ricky from the original British version,
That's right.
which could work. But if those of us who are familiar with the British version, I would have a feeling of been there, done that. He's playing the same type of character. Might be better off just to take a shot with somebody who's completely new to the experience, but we'll see.
But yeah, I've been watching the show for a while now, and I watched the original one, and you could see where it all came from. But as far as I'm concerned, they did a great job, and it's funny because the original was so short. It was only like
Yeah,
two
two
very and
seasons.
very short seasons. Also, they don't do the 24 episode marathons. No, they have very,
Well, that's not how they, not to get off on a huge tangent, but in England, they do short
yeah.
seasons. The most episodes you're going to see in one season of a British television show is 13 episodes, which is more like the cable seasons that we have. They never go 22 episodes, and they are more of the opinion they want to go out when the show is still on a high.
Right.
So, I mean, it happens, but very rarely do you see a show go 4 and 5 and 6 seasons. They usually like to go out and just go on to something different. They're not like it's a whole different dynamic from American television. And their version of The Office, they did 2 seasons, 6 episodes apiece, and I think a Christmas
Christmas
special,
special.
and that was it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
remember
was
when I
it.
first heard of it. It was around the time where it was either the Emmys or the Golden Globes. It was something where all of a sudden some top awards, comedy awards, went to The Office, and nobody had any clue what The Office was. It's like, wait a minute, what the hell is The Office? It's like, and since when do we give
Right.
awards to foreign shows?
Yeah.
And when I finally got my hands on DVD of that, it was like, oh my God, this stuff is hilarious. Which is weird
Hmm.
because normally when it comes to British comedy, for me it's hit or miss. There's certain stuff I just don't get, and there's certain stuff that really hits it with me. And
Hmm.
this one was one that off the bat it's like, oh my God, this guy is great, and
Yeah.
they were able
Yeah.
to duplicate that pretty well, for the American version. And like we said before, who knows where they're going next because you know, is it really smart to continue the show with another person? Is there more to be said?
Mm.
Who knows? It's you never know with these kind of
Yeah,
shows.
yeah, if the show is still financially viable, I think they're gonna go for it. When you do replace a lead actor, Shelley Long on Cheers with Kirstie Alley, and
Yeah.
it worked. But then you've had other times where it's just been a failure. I remember watching that '70s show, and when I used to love that show, and when Ashton Kutcher left, and his name just went right out of my head. The lead who played Eric, who
Oh,
played Venom in
yeah.
Spider-Man
What's his
3.
name?
I can't, it's embarrassed that I'm embarrassed I don't know it. But when he left and they had the show's 8th season, it was miserable.
Did
And
they do an '80s show? Didn't they try doing that?
oh yeah, they did. That didn't even last half a season.
Wow. Well, let's round
Yeah.
off the NBC comedy block, which with the newest show they have, which is outsourced. Have you had a
Hmm.
chance to look at that yet?
Yeah, again, when you have a situation where, you're watching all three shows, it's almost, I'm definitely going to give it a shot. I'm liking it more and more. I've seen 2 episodes. First episode, it's like, okay, I'll give this a little more. And I found the second episode to be very funny, and I love the whole culture clash aspect of it.
Well,
The
the fact that
ensemble.
one character's name is Man Meat, that alone is
Yeah.
comedy gold.
Yeah, it appeals to the geeks too. But it's another one. Good ensemble. I didn't realize this actually until I was making up some notes for today, but it's based on a film.
Yeah.
And yeah, and when I was looking up the film, I definitely I want to check it out because it's got the same premise, and you can see what they're going to have to draw out for this, for however many to go, you could see the beginnings of it in the last episode, and in terms of his attraction for one of the employees and all the culture clash stuff that's going to happen if they get involved in a romance and that kind of thing. But yeah, now I want to check out the film, and like I said, I'm enjoying it. It's not the funniest show in the comedy block, but it works for me.
When I first heard about it, I was a little turned off by it because the preview that I saw, a couple of quick clips, I just didn't find it funny, and I was like, you know what? Let's just try a full episode, see what happens, and more so than in Bleep My Dad Says. It surprised me. The premiere episode surprised me in terms of how funny I found it to be. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm continuing with it. It's weird because at first I thought it was just going to be these goofy, like ethnic type of jokes in terms of, okay, we've seen Apu on The Simpsons, and we all know the Apu joke, and it's like, are they just
stereotype?
Right? Are they going to just beat it to death, for a half hour? And no, it's actually funny, this type of stuff they deal with, and the different characters. They're all different. They're all funny. You have a little bit of everything. They sprinkled them on.
Yes.
And so far so good. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and I just the other thing is I like Dietrich Bader, who was on the Drew Carey show.
Right. And he was in Office Space.
Yes, and I think he's very funny, and especially in the last episode that I watched, I think he's great.
Cool. Let's go back to CBS now, and in the 9 o'clock hour, which we have CSI. Now, CSI is, like we said before, that's my equivalent of your Law and Orders. Stick with them. The Thursday night CSI, that's the main one. That's the original one. But again, the show lost William Peterson and now has
Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne. It used to be Larry. Now it's Lawrence Fishburne. He gets very upset if you call him Larry.
Yes.
So
be careful.
Next time I meet him, I have to make sure not to offend him. But it's not as good as it used to be. William Peterson, he was just a different type of character, and he brought his own thing. Lawrence Fishburne is good, but he's not as good. The show still continues with its formula and its look and everything, and like you said before, it's comfort food. You just watch it, and you know what you're getting, and every now and then something weird will happen. It's also all these CSI shows are also very graphic. Every year they seem to get even more graphic than what they show you. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if that's one of the reasons I watch it, but it's more of the same, and I'm cool with it. The other show, I don't think you watch either on CBS, is The Mentalist that comes after CSI. You don't watch it. Okay. That one, I was interested in Simon Baker. He's done a couple of other TV shows. I remember him from LA Confidential. But
yes,
he's tried a couple of shows in the past that failed. He was on one, I think, with Ray Liotta. They played like bank robbers or something. Or
yes, that's right. It didn't last long at all.
Show, but on this one,
Heist.
I think it might have been Heist or something like that. Or it was a one-word show. I remember.
Yeah.
This particular show, I think this is the second or third season. It's not a supernatural show. It's kind of like a guy who kind of can read people in terms like scientifically kind of read them, psychologically read them, and he used to be a phony psychic, and he admits that. That's the general premise, and it's interesting. I don't know what you can compare it to. It's a cop-ish kind of show. It's somebody gets killed or something and they're investigating. But it's I guess it's the cop with a twist type of show. Nothing out of this world. No earth-shattering genre stuff. Obviously for our subject, but I keep up with it. I don't mind it. For now. Let's see where it goes. I know you watch Fringe. Tell me about Fringe.
Yeah, Fringe is probably my favorite straight science fiction show that's on television today. You have John Noble, who played Denethor in Lord of the Rings, and he's the heart of the show. I think he's hilarious. And I love Fringe is a show that it didn't take too long. There was a mystery to it, but it didn't take too long to kind of reveal itself. At least I didn't feel it took too long to reveal itself.
Right.
By midway or early, you knew you were dealing with a parallel universe situation. And I just love again, it's a show that is a little bit reminiscent of X-Files, where you have the arc shows and you have the standalone shows, the so-called Monster of the Week or disease of the week or whatever, however you want to characterize it. But I think equally they work equally. And you have another great ensemble with Anna Torv and Joshua Jackson. Joshua Jackson playing his son Peter.
Or is he?
Yeah, or is he? Yeah. But I love the technology that his character invents. That again, it's pure science fiction, but yet it seems rooted in some kind of reality. It's not ridiculous, at least to me. The things that he comes up with, you get a sense, he could sort of, that could happen, or this kind of technology could exist. And I once they really got into the whole parallel universe aspect of it, and they crossed over, and you saw the damage that was done by John Noble's character by doing what he did. I don't know if I should discuss it in terms of
and Mr. Spock,
and then of course you met Leonard Nimoy, who, I mean, that just sealed the deal for me having him on the show. Which is due to his relationship with J.J. Abrams and the producers of the show. The fact that they got him on this show to play a recurring character. He doesn't look like he'll come back, but it was great to see him, and his brief interaction with John Noble I thought was terrific. But the way the show stands now, it's fresh, it's new. The characters in different directions, in terms of what happened last season and the cliffhanger, and now what's going on with Olivia being trapped in the alternate reality, and sort of the role revert, the switch of her doppelganger being in our universe, and she's trapped in their universe, and how that's all playing itself out. I don't know how the legs that the show is going to have, but I think it's been consistently terrific.
Yeah, for me, I remember when they first announced they had the supernatural-ish kind of show coming. I gave it a try, and at first it was to me it was a little weak. It kept reminding me of X-Files. I'm like, okay, it's the X-File wannabe show. Obviously, the big difference was that they weren't touching the UFO genre. They were staying with the technological monster of the week, government kind of weirdness and
conspiracy.
Right, and they kind of stuck to that. But what was interesting is that when the show finally started to gel and really identify itself for what it was, even though you had the non-arc shows, the monster of the week type of shows, they tried to kind of link them to the main idea of the show. It wasn't like, tomorrow they're doing the Phantom of the Opera, and it's just a bizarre creature that runs through the building. No, it had to do something with all these weird experiments that they were they were running back in the 80s or whatever.
Right, everything had a tangible connection.
Right, they try to connect them so you kind of stay with it. Obviously, like you said before, John Noble, he's the star of the show. I don't know if he's supposed to be, but he's such a great character. I don't know if the guy's just a ham, in front of a camera or what, but he's just that good. And hopefully, let's hope it continues with the. I don't know if this is it in terms of, we know what the storyline is. It's a parallel universe thing, but is this the type of thing that can continue for years, or is it the type of thing that once you talk about it for a year and a half, you have to then wrap it up and move on to another one of his crazy old experiments that has to do with something?
Yeah, I don't think that once they reach the pinnacle with the parallel universe story, I mean, I think that's the heart of the show. I don't know how long they can keep it going. I honestly don't see it going for having a kind of an X-Files run. I would see it as more of a 5-year show than a 7 or a 10-year show. But I would just be happy to see the storyline play itself out in its natural progression, sort of the way Lost did, and not push it, because then it'll just. I think that was Files to a certain degree, and I think it went on past its prime. So I'm more of the opinion that a show should just end when its story is.
But do you think that the parallel universe is the center of the show from beginning to end?
I do. I think that was because as you pointed out, even the Freak of the Week shows had a real connection to the arc, and everything flows from what Walter did and the parallel universe, and now the damage that he caused in the other universe,
right.
and what they want to do now to our universe. how far they take that storyline. If they get ambitious enough, are we going to be invaded by this Earth? Are they
Right.
going to really, come through the rift and try to take over? I mean, but I do believe that's the heart of the show. That story is told, and then it's
Right.
going to be over.
And even if they wrap that up, it's going to be a little difficult to convince the audience that, oh, wait a minute, but he also did these other experiments having to do with tadpoles and Jello that completely forgot about, that now creates an entire possible 2-3 seasons worth of, it's like you can't fool the audience that many times. I mean, granted, we are dealing in science fiction here, but okay, he's a kooky guy, but let's just stay in some reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if Fringe is still considered a bubble show, but it definitely was after its first season. And I don't know if it's got that massive following that a show like X-Files had that would keep it going because the fan base was so huge.
Well, to throw it out there on a Thursday night, that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's very ambitious, and it's got a good lead in
after Bones. Yeah,
Bones, a long-lasting show. Yeah, so we'll see.
Do you have anything else on Thursdays?
Well, it's a good segue. I do watch Bones, and it's really the show, even though it's not part of it's its own franchise because it's nothing challenging or brain teasing about it. The heart of the show is the will they or won't they romance dynamic between Emily Deschanel and David Boreanaz, and they play it well. But it's definitely playing itself out. I believe this is the 6th season, and I think it's definitely going to be time to pack it in soon. Show that has a great ensemble, very sharp, crisp writing, and again, the dynamic between the two of them, they have this sort of feisty dynamic because of the way they feel a certain way about each other, but they never get together, and because they never get together, they're always a combination that they're at each other's throats, but they love each other, blah, 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 kind of a thing, and it's an entertaining show. Again, a very graphic show in terms of what they show, in terms of the autopsies and what have you. It's unbelievable, but it's definitely one of those that I'll stick with to the end. Kind of, it's losing steam, but I'll stay with it to the end.
Cool. I think that's pretty much all for Thursday. Thursday's one of the biggest nights of the week. It's always been since the '80s. I think it's been the
absolutely
must-see TV and the old NBC logo. Cool. So let's wrap it up here. Thank you everybody for listening to our Thursday 2010 preview recap show. Once again, I'd like to thank Steve for joining me, and we will see you guys next time on Geekfest Rants.
You ever toss and turn your mind awake and thinking about the one you love? I think so. You ever close your eyes, you're making believe you're holding the one you're dreaming of? Well, if you see it so, it hurts so bad when you finally know just how low